Hello, I'm Robert Mellin, and I retired as an associate professor at the end of 2018, and I started teaching at McGill in 1999. I was a grad student here from 1982 to 1984 in the minimum cost housing program. And Vikram Bhatt was my supervisor. One of my instructors was Witold Rybczynski. I also studied a lot with Norbert Schonauer. And at that time, the thesis program at McGill involved 2 years, 1 year of coursework and then perhaps another year of your research on your project. So I was fortunate to be able to go to India with the assistance of Vikram Bhatt, who connected me with Balkrishna Doshi and his Vastu Shilpa Foundation in Ahmedabad, India. And Vikram kindly paved the way for my introduction, and I arrived, I believe, in the fall of 1983 in Ahmedabad, and probably didn't do very much research for the first 2 months because I was trying to repair my motorcycle and that I had purchased from a grad student who actually almost exchanged places with me and came to McGill at that time. So after I finally got the motorcycle to work and got my apartment sorted out, then I started some of my research. So Doshi very kindly permitted me to stay in his office in what was the outskirts of Ahmedabad at the time. Now I understand from Vikram that it's almost a central location, considering how the city has grown. So I was there for a while in his beautiful office, and architects were visiting from all over the world because he had just finished his quasi-subterranean vaulted office, which was just beautifully designed. So I got to meet a lot of interesting people from all over the world who would float in and out of the office to see this new construction, and also to get to know Doshi and his family a bit. And then he kindly permitted me to have a desk in the lower area of the office. And I was quite fond of the office staff. We would have our lunch in the courtyard every day. First thing we had to do in the morning, since this was on the outskirts of Ahmedabad, and since the office where we were working was a little bit below grade, we had to check under the desks for snakes, cobras, in case they slithered in looking for a nice cool spot. So my research was the documentation, let's say a post-occupancy evaluation, but it was quasi-post-occupancy of a site and services project. And this was the Bhadreshwar site and services project, which was almost adjacent to the airport, a few kilometers out of town. So I was very interested in this because we were in the minimum cost housing program. We were trying to find alternatives for the housing delivery process for international development for low-cost housing. And this was a project where infrastructure was provided by a housing association or possibly by a government subsidy, and providing sanitation in the form of septic systems and also community wells. And people were able to buy plots of land at subsidized rates to build their own houses, ostensibly to build their own houses. So my study was an attempt to find out if the project had met its target audience and if people were in fact building their own houses, and if the basic layout of the community was conducive to congenial community building. So that was my thesis, and I spent some months working on that and also traveling around. And when I came back to Montreal after I graduated, I decided to work on a PhD at the University of Pennsylvania. And one of my, the instructors that I studied with, as I think I mentioned, Norbert Schonauer, ended up on my PhD committee at the University of Pennsylvania. And I guess I could say that my experience in the minimum cost housing program inspired me to continue my studies of housing. So my PhD was on vernacular architecture. I studied in the history and theory program at Penn with Marco Frescari, and I studied in the folklore and folklife department at Penn with Henry Glassy. And I was able to continue not in low-cost housing, but let's say in quite modest housing, vernacular, the vernacular architecture of a place where I had spent a lot of time and worked as an architect before coming to McGill, the island of Newfoundland. So I ended up studying the vernacular architecture of that province, of one little fishing village called Tilting on the northeast coast of the island of Newfoundland for my PhD. Then, after my children came along, I took a bit of a break, did some more research and some applied research in Newfoundland on various things, and then, as I mentioned, started teaching in 1990. So what I've been doing the past few years, trying to stay upright during the pandemic, and also I've spent quite a bit of time over the past 10 years or 15 years in Nicaragua, building a house there, getting to know people there, doing some teaching there in an arts college, and trying to get a bit involved with housing sponsored by various NGOs. But as you probably know, because of some political difficulties in Nicaragua, that's been difficult to do recently. But I still go there, and my family still goes there. This is a project that Doshi's worked on probably about 3 or 4 years after I left Ahmedabad. This is an indoor sites and services project in India. And I believe Vikram Bhatt was involved with this project, and also people in Doshi's office. So I heard about the project when I was working in Doshi's office. But I really wasn't involved with it. But a lot of the drawings that you would see here are similar to the drawings that I did for my evaluation of the Badreshwar project in Ahmedabad, trying to really understand how people were living in the community, what the use of space was in the house, what possessions they had, what they required. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of what I discovered in the project that I was working on, which may have some similarities for indoor, it was the Gujarat Housing Board that developed the basic plan for the Badreshwar Site and Services project, and it was a kind of quasi-grid plan of streets with, as I mentioned, with standpipes for water supply and septic systems in some large open spaces that were almost designed like courtyards but didn't really function as courtyards. So the modesty of the plots, the small plots, were, I think, conducive to owner-built housing, but I found that it was more of the middle income level that had access to this housing rather than the lowest economic sector. They used to call it the EWR, which was, I believe, the economically weaker sector. So perhaps a term that we wouldn't use today. But anyway, it did not really reach its intended target group. But there were still some good things that happened with the development over a period of time that took place. And there was a lot of input that people had in their housing. So if you look at the indoor project, you can see much the same type of process here in the drawings, beautiful drawings, in these black and white pen and ink drawings. If you look at this drawing over here in particular, this little one here, which may be a little bit hard to read, you'll see a process that the architect has documented of incremental growth, of how you could modestly add to your house over a period of time, build up equity. And Vikram actually got a chance to go back to the project that I documented, and it was really interesting to see how that had changed over time, of how people had built up more than 1 or 2 stories, and how urban this actual, this suburban location had become over time. And also how much care people lavished on their houses, how proud they were of their houses. In fact, some of these houses were probably no larger than one of our living rooms. That was the entire house. And often you would see a plaque on the outside that indicated that this was the family's mansion. So it gives you an idea of what people thought of their houses.